And we are back on The Verdict. Great to see you again. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're here each and every week meeting interesting people and talking about topical subjects. And today we're going to meet Michael Evans, who has somewhat to do with, back to the roots for this show, the legal system and the verdict.
Yeah, the verdict rises again. Mike is the administrative director of the courts in Oklahoma. Now, we have had in past shows, we've had on a couple of occasions the Chief Justice of the Oklahoma Supreme Court. We've had the presiding judge of the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals. We've had a number of district judges and the like on, but we've never had the administrative director of the courts, and he has a job that is very important and not very visible, and we're trying to give it a little more visibility because it means a lot to all of us.
Look forward to it. It's coming up today on The Verdict. Stay with us.
In driving rain, blistering heat, and bitter cold, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, Chesapeake drills non-stop for natural gas on American soil. Chesapeake drills more new gas wells than anyone else, and from those wells collects the most drilling information and acquires more 3D seismic images, leveraging every efficiency to improve the odds of finding more natural gas every day with every well we drill. The better job we do of discovering bigger reserves of clean-burning American natural gas, the greater the prosperity of our nearby communities, our state, and our nation. And as long as there are more gas reserves to be found here in the U.S., we will never rest. Chesapeake. Natural gas wins the day.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Today we're very pleased to have Michael Evans, the administrative director of the Oklahoma court system. He did his undergraduate work at Oklahoma State University and his law work at the University of Oklahoma. He was an assistant district attorney in Tillman County for a number of years. That's in Frederick. He also had private practice in Frederick for many years with a fine Oklahoma lawyer, Tony Massett. He was in 2005 the president of the Oklahoma Bar Association, and for the last couple of years he's been in his current position as administrative director of the courts. His first visit to The Verdict. Mike, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. I appreciate it.
Give us a little bit of your background. In Frederick, having a practice, did you grow up there, and what was that like your years preceding this job in Oklahoma City?
Well, I actually grew up in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and then I went to Oklahoma State University in 1965 and ran track there. Graduated in 1969, was in the National Guard. Did my basic training then, and in 1970 entered law school at the University of Oklahoma, and graduated in 1973. I had wanted to go into the FBI, and there was a hiring freeze during a couple of periods of time in the 73. I'd been accepted to the academy, but I went to Frederick really on a temporary basis to work in the district attorney's office, and after about 4 or 5 months, I enjoyed it enough that I decided I wanted to stay, and did in fact practice down there for a little over 32 years.
Wow.
Well, it's a small town. You must have liked the small town life in Frederick.
I really did. It was a great place to raise a family. Frederick is an unbelievable community. We've had a lot of state leadership there over the years. We've had a couple of presidents of the state bar, vice president of the state bar. We've had president of the Bankers Association, Bill Crawford. We've had President of the Dental Association, Keith Keeter, just
Speaker
a lot
of
of
the House.
excellent leadership. Obviously, Lloyd Benson, almost everybody in the state knows Lloyd, and And Lloyd was in Frederick at the time I moved there. We were good friends all the time we were there, and certainly I was proud of his leadership in the House of Representatives.
Well, how do you think your small town practice in Frederick, of course you did an awful lot of things besides just practice law, but how do you think that practice helped you get prepared for what you do today?
Well, there were two or three things, and one of them, really most of it I would have to attribute to my senior law partner, Tony Massad. Tony was involved in the tort reform of the 1960s. He was in the legislature and the Senate at that time. I had a history with, I didn't practice with Tony for about 8 or 9 years, but when I went in with Tony, I was really familiar with what was going on in the judicial arena and stayed that way. Tony was always asked to lobby for the judiciary with respect to salary issues and things like that, and so it was just a good partnership for he and he got me involved essentially in the state bar politics that I was involved in later on. I got to know lawyers and judges all over the state, and as a result, the transition into this office was really quite easy for me. I knew people in every area of this state. I have friends in all over the state of Oklahoma, and it really made this job much easier because just knowing the people or knowing a significant number of them has helped me in that transition.
For the non-attorney, the non-judge, describe what it is you do throughout the state of Oklahoma. What are you responsible for?
Well, my primary responsibility is to work with the Chief Justice of the Oklahoma Supreme Court to carry out the administrative duties of the judiciary itself. And we serve the judiciary itself as far as the payroll, insurance, and things like that for not only our judges, but also our court reporters statewide. We also help with a number of other judicial personnel, primarily secretary bailiffs. We give a lot of advice to our court clerks, who are obviously local officials, but there are 77 of them. They have a significant role in the judicial system at the local level. I interface with the legislature for the state budget of the judiciary. I also am kind of a liaison between the executive branches of government and the legislature. I really have a lot of hats that I wear with respect to my job, and it's one of the things that makes it fun. I have a lot of people that I interface with, and I like people.
Well, you said something there that made me think that you may do some lobbying out at the Capitol. Is that part of the role? If the courts have an issue, or if the Supreme Court has an issue, that you kind of work it through the legislative system?
Yes, I do in fact lobby, certainly, at least with respect to our state budget. Our funding is not completely dependent upon the legislature, but it has a significant role in the impact of our budget. And so I do quite a bit of lobbying work. Now, we do not lobby. I think many Oklahomans and sometimes many legislators think that we can or should be out there to legislate on various issues involving like drug courts and some other things like that. They feel like we ought to have a presence out there to do that. My experience with the Oklahoma Supreme Court is that they have been reluctant to actually engage in those kinds of substantive legal issues because the courts themselves have to interpret that legislation. And there are in fact justices who have questions about some of the aspects of drug court and things like that. Those are not traditional ways of administering justice in the state of Oklahoma, I would say.
Well, I suppose the mere fact that when you speak to whatever constituency it might be, you're speaking many times on behalf of the Oklahoma Supreme Court. That carries a pretty heavy burden. You have to be pretty careful about that.
It does, and actually, Kent, the Chief Justice is actually the spokesperson for the court. And so I really play a secondary role. I'm really their administrator, and I'm very reluctant to speak publicly about issues that are before the court or even decisions that have been made by the court. We are frequently asked by the media to comment on opinions that are issued by the court, and we essentially take the position that those opinions speak for themselves. And I do not interface with the court in trying to determine why they render certain decisions in the way that they do. And as you well know, Kent, from your years of practice, there are a lot of different views on the Supreme Court, even when decisions are rendered.
What kind of staff do you have?
Well, I have about 70 people on my staff at this time. About 80% of those people work in our MIS department. They are directly affiliated with OSCN and what's called OCIS, which is the Oklahoma Court Information System. OSCN is the public part of that. where the public can access records in some counties in Oklahoma, and so most of my employees are involved in that. Most of the rest, actually, the other 14 or 15 employees really primarily focus on the administrative work that we do for the judicial officers themselves and judicial personnel all over the state of Oklahoma.
How do the courts get their money, and who decides how much money that the courts need?
Well, the legislature completely determines what our financial needs are. Now, we are funded by a couple of different mechanisms. First of all is that about 50% of our money is actually raised at the local level. In the 77 district courts, the court clerks themselves have budgets that are submitted to the Chief Justice for approval every year. And at the present time, about 50% of our funding comes from the excess money that's taken in at the district court level.
Through filing fees and
Through filing
fines
fees and fines and that sort of thing, Kent. Yes, sir. About the district courts themselves, their total expenses last year were around $53 million statewide. They then sent in approximately $36 million to what's called the State Judicial Fund, and that money was used to pay the salaries of judges and other administrative expenses. And then the legislature appropriated last year approximately $39 million in addition to that for the operation of our appellate courts and the balance that would have been necessary to operate the district courts on a statewide basis.
Michael Evans is the administrator of the Office of the Courts. We'll have more with Michael and learn more when we get back on The Verdict.
Shining is taking responsibility. At Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Oklahoma, we know managing your health care can be overwhelming, and it's our job to help you meet the challenge. By guiding, supporting, and showing the way, we encourage you to gain control. Because we believe the best tool we can give you is the confidence to take charge. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Oklahoma, shining through.
Okiwani is an Indian name for a place where children play. When we obtained the camp, we found a lot of oil debris left in the woods. We saw a commercial about how the oil and natural gas industry cleans up old oil well sites. We called the OERB and they agreed to remove tons of concrete and steel. It didn't cost us a thing. Thousands of children have left their footprints on this land. Thanks to the oil and gas industry, they will for a long time to come.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Michael Evans is the administrator of the Office of the Courts. What are the major projects that you're dealing with now that would affect how the courts operate?
Well, the last term of the legislature, Mayor, we were authorized a fee increase for the court itself, which is the first time that's happened in a number of years. And that fee increase will allow us to do something that I think may be the most significant thing that I'm able to participate in while I'm court administrator. At the current time, we do not have all 77 court clerks on the same court information system. And this additional fee will allow us to do that, to have what I call a unified court information system, a unified case management system. And I think that this will bring our court system truly into the 21st century when we are able to put the money into the district courts themselves. And I think it's going to make a significant difference on the way that our judges are able to manage their dockets and things of that nature, which most of us would like to see improved regardless of whether it's a rural jurisdiction or a more metropolitan area. We always feel like there can be some improvement made in those areas. So that's one of the aspects of the bill. The other aspect of the bill is that for the very first time in Oklahoma history, our court clerks will be allowed to accept credit and debit cards. And I'm in the process of essentially working with the solicitation of vendors at this time under the auspices of the Supreme Court to allow that to happen. I think that that will be a significant convenience to the public. And after all, the judiciary is really should be focused on meeting the needs of the public just like any other branch of government. And I think that this will be a service that will be welcomed in the community. And also will, frankly, I think, help us with our collections statewide. I think it will have a twofold purpose. Another thing that we have been working on for several years and that I hope we'll continue to work on that I think will have a significant impact on the state of Oklahoma is called our Court Improvement Project. It is primarily directed toward abused and neglected children on trying to essentially see that children are given greater rights, given greater opportunities to work their way through the system in a shorter period of time, not have children exposed to some of the dangers and past abuses that have occurred in both the child welfare system and also to some extent in the court system. I think that there are a number of people that work with children in our judicial system that would like to make a significant difference in the lives of children. And I think that this project is going to give us an opportunity to do that. We've been working for several months, the Chief Justice and I have been working with particularly Oklahoma County and Tulsa County to see if we can't come up with some new concepts on how we would be able to improve those processes. Funding would help. There's never enough money to do everything we need to do. But this is an area where I know the legislature is focused, and I think it's just a matter of trying to get the multidisciplinary team of people that need to be involved in this process focused on what's most important, and that's the kids themselves, and then putting the resources where they need to be. And that applies to our district attorney's offices, it applies to our public defenders, OIDs. We just need to have more money in the system to do a better job.
What do you think is the most difficult challenge that the court system is facing now as a system?
Well, there are two or three things that are ongoing problems, Kent. One of them is not new, but it persists and it just does not appear that it's going to go away. And that's really what I call a general classification area called a tax on the judiciary. Too many politicians, and I think too many Americans, just simply want to politicize the judiciary. And there's a very significant danger if that ever occurs. I know that even with the couple of years I've been around the Oklahoma legislature, that there have been occasions where legislation is sponsored that is, I think, designed to change the structure that we've had for the last couple of hundred years in this country. And I am concerned about those kinds of changes. We have justices and judges all over this state that I'm sure are registered Republican and I'm sure are registered Democrat. They try to do their job on the basis of the law, which is really the charge that they have in my view. And we do not have significant problems in the legislature with one party or the other. They're both very cooperative. I think they've been extremely good to the judiciary for a number of years. I am not critical at all of the legislature, but I think we just need to be very careful that we do not politicize parts of the process. And where that occurs, you see it in the newspaper all the time. I don't need to describe where this has happened, but I can tell you that it's a danger that when it does happen. And these attacks don't just occur in Oklahoma. I would say Oklahoma was actually better than most states in house some of these, but this jail challenge up in South Dakota last year was defeated, but there was an effort being made. Essentially, there have been efforts made in states to put term limits on judges and things like that, and those are not, in my view, in the best interest of the public. We need to have public officials that can serve in the judiciary, that can have a degree of independence to do what's right. And I have political views like everyone else, but it's important that our judges not have those political views in rendering decisions.
Big trend across the country and in Oklahoma about specialty courts, whether we're talking about drug court or mental health court or business court, and there might be another court or area that I've left out. But give me your opinion on whether that trend is good, and if I've left any out, feel free to expand on how our court system is adapting to this new areas.
Well, we do have specialty courts in Oklahoma. We have approximately 45 drug court programs in various jurisdictions or various counties of the state of Oklahoma. We only have a small number of mental health courts at this point in time. And as both of you know, business courts or business dockets have been authorized, but at this point in time, the Oklahoma Supreme Court has not chosen to basically make those dockets possible in both Oklahoma County and Tulsa County. The experience that I had as a practitioner in drug court was very positive. One, there's no question but what these drug courts are changing the lives of people, having a significant impact on the lives of people. But there are some concerns with specialty courts. Oklahoma judicial structure basically has courts of general jurisdiction, which means, and particularly in smaller communities, that many of our judges, particularly our associate district judges in smaller counties, are handling every docket of the district court. And there are 8 dockets authorized by law, authorized by the legislature, including drug court dockets. One of the dangers of the specialty courts is that we only have drug court programs in those counties that feel like they can either afford it or have been able to secure funding through the Department of Mental Health. And as a result, we have, I think, equal protection issues, due process issues with respect to why are these courts not available statewide. I would prefer to see, if I were looking at the legislation and going to tweak it or change it somewhat, I would prefer to see these courts be available statewide, and we have these courts called dockets rather than courts, because we can certainly have dockets, sentencing dockets that dealt with drug court issues. We can certainly have sentencing dockets that dealt with the mental court issues that are now framed or have been framed by the Oklahoma legislature.
I'm going to have to cut you off there, Michael. We are out of time. Obviously, we're going to have you back on a future show to talk more about this. Fascinating work. Thanks for all you do throughout the state of Oklahoma, and I can tell there's several layers to the administration of the court system. Kit and I'll have a final word after this. Thanks.
Good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
Whole nother level of operation than I had ever seen before. Michael Evans was the administrator of the Office of the Courts, and he expounded on what his role and what they do.
Yes, they're right on the cutting edge of what ought to be happening in the judiciary in Oklahoma. And the nice thing about Mike Evans is that I remember when that selection was made, statewide it was greeted by the judiciary and the lawyers and the public that knew Mike with great hope, because he's well-known, well-liked, and extremely capable, and that's a tough job he's got.
If you'd like more information, you can go on the internet, oscn.net, get more information about Mike. We'll see you next week on another show.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.